The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky plains of Cathara Prime as Captain Lee Ji-won checked his equipment one last time. The red dust swirled around his boots as he walked toward the two armored vehicles waiting at the edge of their temporary camp. His team was already loading their gear into the heavy military transports. "Sir, are you sure we should go out there with just 4 people?" Park Hyun asked as he secured his demolition equipment in the back of the first vehicle. The young explosives expert had joined the team only 3 months ago, and his nervous energy showed in everything he did. Ji-won looked at his squad. Besides Hyun, there was Kim Yuna, their medic, who was double-checking her medical supplies with the same careful attention she gave everything. Choi Dae-ho sat in the driver's seat of the second vehicle, running through the communication systems and making sure their radio contact with base camp was clear. "The reports say these creatures are just big cats," Ji-won replied, though something in his gut told him it would not be that simple. "We go in, we observe, we report back. No engagement unless absolutely necessary." The colonial settlements on Cathara Prime had been sending distress calls for 2 weeks. Farmers and miners reported massive predators attacking their equipment and destroying their vehicles. No humans had been killed, which was strange, but the economic damage was growing every day. The colonial authority needed answers. Yuna climbed into the passenger seat of the first vehicle and pulled on her helmet. "The settlers said these things are as big as our vehicles. That does not sound like any cat I know." "That is why we are here," Ji-won said, settling into his seat. "Dae-ho, you got a clear signal back to base?" "Crystal clear, sir. They will know where we are every step of the way." The two vehicles rumbled to life and began moving across the barren landscape. Cathara Prime was not a beautiful world. The sky was a pale orange color, and most plants were low scrub bushes that could survive in the thin atmosphere. The gravity was lighter than Earth, which made walking easier, but driving more difficult on the loose ground. They had been traveling for 2 hours when Dae-ho's voice crackled through the radio. "Captain, I'm picking up some large heat signatures about 2 kilometers ahead. Multiple contacts moving fast." Ji-won felt his pulse quicken. "How large?" "Bigger than our vehicles, sir. Much bigger." The landscape ahead changed from flat plains to rocky outcroppings and small canyons. Perfect hunting territory for large predators. Ji-won ordered both vehicles to slow down and stay close together. "There." Yuna pointed through the front window. "On that ridge." Ji-won looked where she was pointing and felt his breath catch. Standing on a rocky ledge about 300 meters away was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was massive, easily 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with 6 powerful legs and a long, muscular body. Its fur was completely black, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. Along its back ran a series of what looked like crystal spines that caught the sunlight and threw it back in brilliant flashes, but it was the eyes that made Ji-won's hands tighten on his weapon. They glowed with a bright blue light that was clearly visible even at this distance. The creature's head was like a panther's, but much larger, with powerful jaws that could easily crush bone. "Holy saints," Hyun whispered over the radio. "Look at the size of that thing." The creature watched them for a long moment, then let out a sound that was part roar, part something else entirely. The noise echoed off the canyon walls and seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Both vehicles shook from the power of it. "Sir, we should go back," Dae-ho said, his voice tight with fear. "We should go back right now." But before Ji-won could respond, the creature moved. It did not run down the ridge like a normal animal would. Instead, it leaped, covering the 300 meters between them in a single impossible jump. It landed directly in front of the lead vehicle with a crash that shook the ground. "Reverse, reverse," Ji-won shouted, but it was too late. The creature raised one massive paw and brought it down on the hood of their vehicle. The armored metal designed to stop bullets and explosions crumpled like paper. The engine died instantly, and warning lights flashed across the dashboard. "Out, everyone. Out!" Ji-won yelled, grabbing his rifle and kicking open his door. The team scrambled from both vehicles as the creature turned its attention to the second transport. With casual ease, it placed both front paws on the roof and pressed down. The entire vehicle collapsed, its frame folding in on itself with the screech of tortured metal. Hyun raised his weapon, but Jiwon grabbed his arm. "Do not shoot unless I give the order." The creature had not tried to hurt them. It had destroyed their vehicles completely, but it had waited for them to get out first. That suggested intelligence, not just animal aggression. The massive panther turned toward them, and Jiwon got his first close look at it. The creature was even more impressive up close. Its black fur seemed to move and shift like liquid shadow. The crystal spines along its back pulsed with a faint inner light, but it was still the eyes that held his attention. They were not the simple eyes of an animal. There was something looking back at him, something that was thinking and evaluating. The creature took a step toward them, and Yuna raised her rifle. "Sir, it is coming this way." "Hold your fire," Jiwon ordered, though his own hand was tight on his weapon. The panther moved slowly now, its massive head lowered as if it was trying to appear less threatening. It approached to within 10 meters of the group and stopped. Then, it did something that made Jiwon's blood run cold. It spoke. Not in words that they could understand, but it was clearly trying to communicate. The sounds were complex, with different tones and rhythms. It was not just roaring or growling, it was trying to talk to them. "Captain," Daeho whispered, "we need to call for pickup. Right now." But as Jiwon looked into those glowing blue eyes, he realized something that changed everything. The creature was not looking at all of them. It was looking directly at him and only at him. There was something in that gaze, something that reminded him of a lost dog he had found as a child. Despite its size and power, despite the fact that it had just crushed 2 military vehicles, the creature looked lonely. The panther took another step forward, and this time Jiwon did not move back. Jiwon stood perfectly still as the massive creature moved closer. His team held their weapons ready behind him, but something told him that shooting would be the wrong choice. The panther stopped just 3 meters away, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from its enormous body. The creature lowered its great head until it was level with Jiwon's chest. Those glowing blue eyes studied his face with an intelligence that was impossible to deny. Slowly, carefully, the panther extended its neck and sniffed him. Jiwon felt the warm breath wash over him. The creature's nose was as large as his fist, and he could see the moisture condensing on its black nostrils. For a moment that seemed to last forever, neither human nor alien moved. Then the panther did something that made Yuna gasp behind him. It began to purr. The sound was nothing like a house cat. It was deep and powerful, vibrating through the ground and up through Jiwon's boots. He could feel it in his chest, in his bones, everywhere. But despite its power, the sound was unmistakably gentle, content, happy. The great head moved closer, and suddenly the panther was pressing against Jiwon's chest like an oversized pet seeking attention. The contact nearly knocked him over, but he managed to keep his balance. The creature's fur was softer than he had expected and surprisingly warm. "Sir," Hyun whispered urgently, "what do we do?" Jiwon raised one hand slowly and placed it on the side of the panther's massive head. The purring grew louder, and the creature leaned into his touch. "I think it likes me," he said, hardly believing his own words. The panther pulled back and looked at him again. This time Jiwon was sure he saw something like recognition in those alien eyes. The creature made a series of soft sounds, almost like it was trying to speak to him in a gentler voice. "Captain," Daeho said from behind him, "this is incredible. I am getting readings I have never seen before. This thing's brain activity is off the charts. It is definitely intelligent." As if responding to the comment, the panther turned its attention to the rest of the team for the first time. But instead of the focused interest it had shown Jiwon, its gaze was more distant, almost dismissive. It looked at each of them briefly, then returned its attention to Jiwon. "It has bonded with you," Yuna said in amazement. "Like some animals do with a single person." The panther seemed to understand that they were talking about it. It stepped back and sat down, much like a dog would, though its sitting position still left it taller than any of them. Its tail, thick and powerful, curled around its front feet. Jiwon looked at the destroyed vehicles, then back at the creature. You destroyed our transport, he said, talking to it as if it could understand. But you did not hurt us, why? The Panther tilted its head, listening to his voice. Then it stood and walked over to the wreckage of the first vehicle. Using one massive paw, it carefully pulled a piece of twisted metal from the debris. The metal had been part of the weapons system. The creature brought the piece back to Jiwan and dropped it at his feet. Then it made a low rumbling sound and shook its head. The message was clear. It had destroyed the weapons, not the transport itself. It saw our vehicles as threats, Jiwan realized, but it recognizes us as individuals, as people. Over the next hour, the Panther stayed close to Jiwan while his team tried to figure out what to do next. Their radio still worked, but when Daeho tried to call for pickup, the Panther became agitated. It paced back and forth, making distressed sounds. It does not want us to leave, Yuna observed. Or maybe it does not want you to leave, Captain. The Panther approached Jiwan again and gently nudged him with its head. Then it turned and walked a short distance away, looking back as if inviting him to follow. Sir, you cannot be thinking of going with that thing, Hyun said. But Jiwan was already moving. Something deep inside told him that following the creature was not just safe, but necessary. The Panther led them through the rocky terrain to a cave entrance that was hidden, behind a fallen boulder. Inside the cave, Jiwan's flashlight revealed something extraordinary. The walls were covered with carvings, clearly not made by the Panther but by some other intelligence. The images showed creatures that looked like the Panther alongside beings that were humanoid but not quite human. These carvings are ancient, Yuna said, running her medical scanner over the wall. Thousands of years old, at least. The Panther watched as they examined the cave, occasionally making soft sounds as if it was trying to explain something. At the back of the cave, Jiwan found more carvings that showed the humanoid figures and panthers working together, hunting together, even what looked like them caring for each other. It is trying to show us something, Jiwan said. These carvings, they tell a story. Look here. He pointed to an image of a humanoid figure with its hand on a panther's head, exactly as Jiwan had done earlier. The Panther moved to stand beside him, pressing against his side as they looked at the ancient artwork. Together, the purring started again, softer this time, almost like a contented sigh. When they emerged from the cave hours later, the sun was setting. The Panther had grown more comfortable with the rest of the team, though it still showed clear preference for Jiwan. It would accept food from the others and even allowed Yuna to scan it with her medical equipment, but it always returned to Jiwan's side. As night fell, 3 more panthers appeared on the ridges around them. But instead of approaching, they kept their distance, watching. The first panther, which Jiwan had begun thinking of as Shadowclaw, positioned itself between the new arrivals and the humans. I think you have been adopted, Daeho said with a nervous laugh. Jiwan looked up at Shadowclaw, who was standing guard over their small camp. The creature's crystal spines glowed faintly in the darkness, and its blue eyes never stopped scanning for threats. For the first time since landing on Cathara Prime, Jiwan felt completely safe. The sound of military aircraft approaching woke Jiwan from an uneasy sleep. Shadowclaw was already on its feet, crystal spines glowing brighter as the creature sensed danger. The panther's low growl vibrated through the ground as 6 heavily armed dropships appeared over the horizon. Sir, that is a lot of firepower, Hyun said, watching the ships circle their position. Way more than they would send for a simple rescue. Jiwan activated his radio. Base, this is Captain Lee. We do not need immediate extraction. The situation is under control. The response came from a voice he did not recognize. Captain Lee, this is Colonel Bae Minho. You and your team will stand down and prepare for immediate evacuation. We are here to deal with the hostile alien threat. Colonel, there is no hostile threat here. These creatures are intelligent and peaceful. Captain, you have been in the field too long. Your judgment may be compromised. Prepare for pickup. Shadowclaw moved closer to Jiwan, sensing his tension. The other panthers on the ridges had multiplied during the night. Now there were at least a dozen visible. all watching the approaching military force with obvious wariness. The dropships landed in a rough circle around their position, and soldiers poured out of each one. They carried heavy weapons and wore full combat armor. Colonel Bei Minho was a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes that immediately focused on Shadowclaw. "My God," the colonel said, raising his rifle. "Look at the size of that thing." "Colonel, do not shoot." Jiwan stepped between the soldiers and Shadowclaw. "This creature is not hostile. It has been protecting us." "Protecting you?" Bei Minho laughed harshly. "Captain, that thing destroyed 2 military vehicles. It is a clear threat to human colonization efforts." Shadowclaw did not like the colonel's aggressive tone. The panther's purring stopped and its ears flattened against its head. But it did not attack. Instead, it moved to place itself more completely between Jiwan and the soldiers. "See," Jiwan said. "It is protecting me, not threatening anyone." Colonel Bei Minho was not convinced. "All teams spread out. We are going to eliminate these creatures before they can do more damage to colonial infrastructure." "Sir, you cannot do that." Yuna stepped forward. "These beings are clearly intelligent. Killing them would be murder." "They are animals," the colonel replied. "Dangerous animals that are interfering with human expansion. Dr. Han Minji will arrive shortly to collect specimens for study, but the rest will be eliminated." As if responding to the threat, the panthers on the ridges began to move. They flowed down the rocky slopes like liquid shadow surrounding the human forces. But they did not attack. Instead, they sat down in a large circle, watching and waiting. 43 contacts, one of the soldiers reported. "They have us completely surrounded." Shadowclaw made a series of complex sounds, and the other panthers responded with similar vocalizations. It was clearly some form of communication, but the meaning was lost on the humans. "They are coordinating," Deho said in amazement. "This is organized behavior." Colonel Bei Minho ordered his men to take defensive positions. "If they attack, we open fire. These things may be big, but they cannot stand up to modern weapons." But the panthers did not attack. They simply sat and watched, their glowing eyes fixed on the human soldiers. The standoff continued for an hour until another dropship arrived carrying Dr. Han Minji. The scientist was a small woman with quick, intelligent eyes. She immediately began scanning the panthers with various instruments while staying safely behind the soldiers. "Colonel, these readings are incredible," she called out. "Their brain patterns are more complex than most humans. They are definitely intelligent beings." "I do not care how smart they are," Bei Minho replied. "They are in the way of human expansion." "Doctor." Minji continued her scans, moving closer to get better readings. Shadowclaw watched her carefully but did not seem threatened by her scientific equipment. When she accidentally dropped her scanner, the great panther actually nudged it back toward her with its nose. "Did you see that?" Minji gasped. "It helped me. It understood that I needed the device." "Doctor, step back," the colonel ordered. "We are going to begin elimination procedures." At those words, Shadowclaw rose to its feet and let out a roar that echoed across the entire valley. The other panthers responded immediately, standing as one and moving closer to the human soldiers. But they still did not attack. "They are warning us," Jiwan realized. "They understand what we are planning, and they are giving us a chance to reconsider." Colonel Bei Minho was not impressed. "All units prepare to engage. Target the largest creatures first." "Colonel, wait," Dr. Minji called out urgently. "I am detecting structured energy patterns in their crystal spines. These creatures may have abilities we do not understand." But the colonel had made his decision. "Fire at will." The first shot came from a soldier on the eastern perimeter. The energy blast struck one of the smaller panthers in the shoulder, burning through its fur and flesh. The creature roared in pain and anger. That was when everything changed. The panthers did not just attack. They coordinated their assault with military precision. Some leaped directly at the soldiers while others circled around to attack from behind. But most surprisingly, they focused their attacks on equipment and weapons rather than the soldiers themselves. Shadowclaw moved like lightning, destroying 3 heavy weapons emplacements in seconds. Its claws tore through military-grade armor, plating as if it were paper. Other Panthers smashed communication equipment and disabled vehicles with surgical precision. "They are not trying to kill us," Jiwan shouted over the chaos. "They are disabling our ability to fight." But Colonel Bay, Minho was beyond listening. He ordered his men to fall back to the dropships and call for orbital support. "If ground weapons cannot stop them, we will use ship-based weapons." As the soldiers retreated, the Panthers did not pursue. Instead, they gathered around their wounded packmate, making soft sounds of comfort and concern. Dr. Minji watched in fascination as several Panthers began what looked like a healing ritual, their crystal spines glowing brighter as they focused energy on the injured creature. "They are trying to heal their wounded," she whispered. "Colonel, you have to see this. They are not just intelligent, they are compassionate." But Colonel Bay Minho was already calling for reinforcements. "I want every ship in the system here. Within 6 hours. We are going to burn these creatures out of existence." Shadowclaw approached Jiwan, its great head lowered in what looked like sadness. The Panther pressed against him, purring softly, as if seeking comfort from the one human it trusted. Jiwan looked into those glowing blue eyes and saw something that broke his heart. The creature was not angry or vengeful. It was confused and hurt. It had tried to be peaceful, tried to communicate, and in return it had watched its packmate get shot. "I am sorry," Jiwan whispered, placing his hand on Shadowclaw's massive head. "I am so sorry this happened." The Panther seemed to understand. It nuzzled against him one more time, then turned to rejoin its pack. As the human soldiers prepared to leave, all the Panthers sat down again and watched them go. But Jiwan could see the change in their posture. They were no longer curious or hopeful. They were preparing for war. Dr. Han Minji worked through the night in her temporary laboratory, analyzing the data she had collected from the Panthers. The readings were unlike anything she had ever seen. The creature's crystal spines were not just decorative features. They were sophisticated biotechnological devices that seemed to store and process information. "Captain Lee," she called as Jiwan entered her makeshift research station, "I need to show you something incredible." Jiwan looked tired and worried. Colonel Bay Minho had restricted him to base camp, while the military prepared for a full-scale assault on the Panther population. 3 more battalions had arrived during the night, along with orbital bombardment ships. "Doctor, whatever you found had better be important. The Colonel plans to start bombing runs at dawn." Minji pulled up a holographic display showing complex energy patterns. "These creatures are not native to this planet. The energy signatures in their bodies match technology found in ancient ruins across this sector of space." She switched to another display showing archaeological data. "Look at this. We have found similar crystal formations on 12 different worlds, always associated with ruins from an extinct civilization. But this is the first time we have found the technology integrated into living beings." Jiwan studied the data. "You are saying these Panthers are artificial?" "Not artificial, but definitely enhanced. They were created by an advanced alien race called the Veltani. I found references to them in the ruins we discovered yesterday." Minji pulled up images of the cave carvings they had seen with Shadowclaw. The Velthani died out over 10,000 years ago, but they left these creatures behind as guardians. The Panthers have been waiting here all this time. Waiting for what? Minji hesitated. For someone worthy to bond with. The Velthani created them to be companions and protectors for individuals who showed certain qualities: courage, compassion, leadership ability. Jiwan thought about how Shadowclaw had immediately focused on him, ignoring the rest of his team. "That is why it bonded with me specifically." "Exactly. And from what I can tell, you are the first person in thousands of years that these creatures have deemed worthy. That is why Shadowclaw's acceptance of you has confused the other Panthers. They want to trust humans because of you, but they also see us as a threat." Dr. Minji brought up another display showing brain scans of the Panthers. "Their intelligence is remarkable. They have complex emotional systems, advanced problem-solving abilities, and sophisticated communication methods. In many ways, they are superior to humans. Then why did they destroy our vehicles when we first arrived?" because vehicles and weapons represent the same threat to them that they represented to their original creators. The Vilthani were peaceful, explorers, but they were destroyed by a militaristic species that used advanced technology to conquer worlds. The Panthers were programmed to destroy military equipment while protecting the individuals they bond with. G1 finally understood. They see our military as the same kind of threat that destroyed their creators. And unfortunately, they are right. Minji looked toward the window where military vehicles and weapons were being prepared for the dawn. Assault. Colonel Bei Minho represents everything the Panthers were created to protect against. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Colonel Bei Minho's voice filled the laboratory. All personnel, prepare for Operation Cleansing Fire. Orbital bombardment begins in 30 minutes. Anyone not in a hardened shelter will be considered acceptable casualties. Ji-won grabbed the radio. Colonel, Dr. Minji has made important discoveries. These creatures are not just animals. They are guardians left by an ancient civilization. Captain, I do not care if they are the pets of gods. They are interfering with human expansion, and they will be eliminated. Dr. Minji tried to intervene. Colonel, this could be the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. These beings could teach us about technologies we cannot even imagine. Doctor, you will have plenty of dead specimens to study after the bombardment. Bei Minho out. Ji-won looked at Minji with growing alarm. How many Panthers are out there? Based on my scans yesterday, at least 200 in this region, alone. But there may be thousands across the planet. And they all have the same abilities as Shadowclaw? Minji nodded grimly. The same intelligence, the same loyalty programming, the same protective instincts. If we attack them, we will not just be committing genocide, we will be destroying beings that were specifically created to be humanity's allies. Ji-won made a decision that would change everything. I am going out there. Captain, the bombardment starts in 25 minutes. You will be killed. Maybe, but I have to try to stop this. Ji-won checked his sidearm and headed for the door. Keep analyzing the data. If I do not make it back, make sure someone knows the truth about these creatures. He commandeered a light vehicle and drove toward the canyon where he had first met Shadowclaw. Behind him, he could see the orbital bombardment ships moving into position high above the planet. Their weapons were powerful enough to turn the entire region into a crater. As he approached the canyon, Panthers began appearing on the ridges around him. But instead of the curious, peaceful creatures he had encountered before, these beings looked ready for war. Their crystal spines glowed with angry red light and their eyes burned with barely controlled fury. Then Shadowclaw appeared, leaping down from a high ledge to land directly in front of Ji-won's vehicle. The Great Panther looked different now. Its usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked like heartbreak. Ji-won got out of the vehicle and approached slowly. Shadowclaw, I know you can understand me. We need to talk. The Panther looked at him with those glowing blue eyes, and Ji-won saw something that made his chest tighten. The creature was not angry at him personally. It was disappointed. It had hoped that humans would be different from the species that had destroyed its creators, but Colonel Bei Minho's actions had proven otherwise. Shadowclaw made a series of complex sounds, and other panthers began emerging from their hiding places. Soon, Ji-won was surrounded by over 100 of the magnificent creatures. But instead of feeling threatened, he felt privileged. They were showing him their full strength, trusting him to see them as they truly were. Then Shadowclaw did something that changed everything. The panther approached a section of canyon wall that looked solid, but when it touched the rock with its crystal spines, hidden mechanisms activated. The wall slid aside, revealing a vast underground chamber filled with technology that was clearly not of this world. The Vilthani base, Ji-won whispered in amazement. Shadowclaw led him inside, where holographic displays showed the history of the Vilthani civilization and their ultimate destruction. Ji-won watched in fascination as the displays revealed the truth about the Panther's creation and their long wait for worthy companions. But the most important revelation came at the end. The Vilthani had not just created the Panthers as guardians, They had given them the ability to recognize species that had the potential to become like the Velthani themselves, peaceful, wise, capable of forming bonds that transcended the boundaries between different forms of life. Shadowclaw had recognized that potential in Jiwan, and through him, in humanity as a whole. But now, with orbital bombardment ships preparing to destroy everything, that potential was about to be lost forever. The orbital bombardment was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes when Jiwan emerged from the Velthani base, with Shadowclaw at his side. The knowledge he had gained from the ancient displays burned in his mind. These creatures were not just intelligent beings. They were the key to humanity's future among the stars. He activated his radio and opened a channel to all military frequencies. "This is Captain Lee Jiwan. I am ordering an immediate halt to Operation Cleansing Fire." Colonel Bei Minho's angry voice crackled back immediately. "Captain, you do not have the authority to countermand my orders. Return to base immediately." "Colonel, I am standing in the middle of a Velthani archaeological site. These panthers are not animals. They are guardians of the most advanced technology our species has ever encountered. Captain, you have 30 seconds to clear the target zone." Jiwan looked up at the sky where he could see the bright dots of the orbital weapons platforms. Around him, hundreds of panthers had emerged from their hiding places. They sat in perfect formation, their crystal spines glowing with a soft blue light that seemed to respond to Shadowclaw's presence. "I am not leaving," Jiwan said into his radio. "If you want to destroy these beings, you will have to destroy me too." There was a long silence. Then Colonel Bei Minho's voice returned, colder than before. "Captain, you are relieving yourself of duty. The bombardment will proceed as scheduled." But before the colonel could give the final order, 3 familiar voices came over the radio channel. "This is Demolition Specialist Park Hyun. I am standing with Captain Lee. This is Medic Kim Yuna. I am also standing with the captain. Communications Officer Choi Daeho here. The captain has my full support." Jiwan turned to see his team members approaching in a commandeered transport vehicle. They climbed out and took positions around him, their weapons lowered but ready to defend their position. "Sir," Hyun said with a nervous grin, "we could not let you have all the fun." Shadowclaw moved closer to Jiwan, pressing against his side in a gesture of support. The great panther's purring filled the air, and the other panthers responded with their own sounds of contentment. Despite the danger, they seemed pleased to have humans standing with them. Dr. Han Minji's voice joined the conversation. "Colonel, I have completed my analysis of the Velthani technology. What Captain Lee is saying is correct. These beings could advance human civilization by thousands of years. Doctor, you are also relieved of duty. All personnel clear the target zone immediately." But instead of clearing the zone, more voices began joining the conversation. Scientists, junior officers, even some of the soldiers who had fought the Panthers the day before spoke up in support of Jiwan's position. "This is Lieutenant Commander Park Soo-jin from the orbital platform Destiny. Colonel, I am reading massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. These are not natural phenomena. Lieutenant Commander, you will follow orders and begin bombardment." "Sir, with respect, I think we need to understand what we are dealing with before we destroy it." Colonel Bei Minho's voice was filled with rage. "Anyone who refuses to follow orders will be court-martialed. Begin bombardment now." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Lieutenant Commander Park Soo-jin spoke again. "Colonel, I am sorry. I cannot in good conscience destroy what may be the most important discovery in human history." One by one, the other orbital platforms reported similar decisions. The bombardment fleet was refusing to fire. Shadowclaw seemed to sense the change in the situation. The great panther stood and let out a sound that was part roar, part song. Every panther in the valley responded, their voices joining together in a harmony that resonated through the ground and up into the sky. "My God," Yuna whispered. "They are singing." The song of the panthers filled the air for several minutes, growing stronger and more complex as more voices joined in. When it finally ended, the silence was profound. Then something extraordinary happened. The panthers began to move, but not in attack formation. Instead, they arranged themselves in pairs, with each panther approaching a different human. But they were not just approaching randomly. Each panther seemed to be choosing a specific person. Shadowclaw remained at Jiwan's side, but a smaller panther with silver markings approached Yuna. Another, with distinctive golden spines, moved toward Hyun. A third, sleek and graceful, padded over to Daeho. They are choosing us, Jiwan realized. Just like Shadowclaw chose me. Dr. Minji watched in amazement as a panther with unusual violet markings approached her. The bonding process. It is happening just like in the Valthani records. Colonel Baemino's voice cut through the moment. All ground forces prepare to engage. If the orbital platforms will not fire, we will handle this ourselves. But when the colonel's soldiers moved to attack positions, they found themselves facing not just the panthers but their own comrades who had chosen to stand with the creatures. The human forces were divided, with roughly half supporting the colonel and half supporting Jiwan. The standoff continued for hours as more people arrived from the colonial settlements. Word of the discovery had spread quickly, and civilians were demanding to see the panthers for themselves. As the sun reached its highest point, a new voice joined the conversation. This is Governor Chen Myung of the Cathara Prime Colonial Authority. I am ordering an immediate ceasefire and the establishment of a joint Human-Panther Council to determine the best course of action. Colonel Bai Minho protested. Governor, these creatures are a threat to human expansion. Colonel, from what I'm hearing, these creatures may be the key to human advancement. You are hereby relieved of command. Captain Lee, you are in charge of the situation until further notice. Jiwan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Governor, I recommend we establish a formal first contact protocol. These beings are not just intelligent, they are potential allies. Over the following days, the relationship between humans and panthers developed rapidly. The bonding process that had begun with Jiwan and Shadowclaw spread to dozens of other humans. Each bond was unique, but all shared the same characteristics: mutual respect, emotional connection, and a sense of partnership that transcended species. Dr. Minji established a research station at the Valthani base, working with the Panthers to unlock the secrets of the ancient technology. The discoveries were remarkable: advanced medical techniques, energy systems that could power entire cities, and transportation methods that could revolutionize space travel. But the most important discovery was the Panthers themselves. They were not just guardians of technology. They were teachers, companions, and bridges between different forms of consciousness. 3 months after first contact, the first official Human-Panther alliance was signed. The document established Cathara Prime as a joint colony, where both species would work together to explore the legacy of the Valthani and advance their mutual understanding. Jiwan stood in the main square of the new joint settlement, watching, as human children played alongside young panthers. Shadowclaw lay in the shade nearby, no longer the fearsome creature that had crushed military vehicles. Now he was simply Jiwan's partner, friend, and guide to a future that neither species could have imagined alone. The creatures that had once been seen as threats to human expansion had become humanity's greatest allies. And in learning to trust them, humans had taken their first steps toward becoming something greater than they had ever been before. As the sun set over Cathara Prime, Jiwan placed his hand on Shadowclaw's massive head and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there were other worlds, other species, other opportunities for the kind of understanding that had been born here. The future had never looked brighter, and humanity would not be facing it alone.